Today we're going to be talking about 3 tips to getting out of debt. I'm Garrett Weldon, and this is my channel. Getting out of debt is a journey, and my wife and I have finally done it. $522.64 was our last payment on our car. I told myself, once we're debt-free, I'm going to start a YouTube channel to share things we've done to get where we are, and to share things we're now trying to do to arrive at financial longevity. Tip number 1, you've got to have a budget. Getting out of debt just doesn't happen. It takes focus. And it's interesting, so back in 2010, there's a research study that was done by Daniel Simmons, and I'll link to it down below. You've got to go watch it. But in essence, what he did, he had 3 people in white shirts and 3 people in black shirts that were passing a basketball back and forth. The white team amongst white members and the black team amongst black members. And your only job was to have to count the number of times the basketball was passed between the team members wearing the white shirt. And in the middle of this research, in the middle of this trial, a gorilla walks out into frame, pounds his chest, and then exits. And only about 50% of people, 50% of participants even noticed the gorilla. Hence the name of the video, Selective Attention Test. Conclusion, we are blind to so much of the world, and we only see what we choose to focus on. So it matters what you choose to set your eyes to. The average person works 2,080 hours on an annual basis to produce what Dave Ramsey calls their largest wealth building tool, your income. Yet how much time on a weekly, monthly, or even annual basis do you spend telling that income what to do? You know, wind will extinguish a candle, but it will ignite a campfire. The difference? What it's built on. One is a wax stick, and the other is framed in logs. It matters the foundation that you build, and your budget is that foundation. I will link down below to where I dive in deep of how to set up a budget and how we've set up a budget and the tools we use, from different Excel spreadsheets to apps. Tip number 2, side hustles that actually make money. I've grossed over $30,000 in side hustles, in side projects. I had an entrepreneurship teacher tell me, you need to learn how to make money that's not tied to W-2 employment, not tied to it, in another way, bringing value in another way than just normal employment. Because with those skills, you'll be able to build and build and build on them until ultimately that is the foundation that can support your family and support your dreams. So there's 3 keys that I use when I assess side hustles or side projects. 1, what's the margin on this opportunity? 2, is there a market for it? And 3, is there a multiple opportunity? So margin, market, and multiples. Of the side hustles that have allowed me to gross $30,000, let me tell you a little bit about each one. And I'll go into detail about each of these side hustles in a video below, so look for that link as well. I had a friend that had made 10,000 kids play mats, the type that's like a city that you lay down and then you're able to drive cars in and out of the roads and go to different locations within the city. And he had stopped selling them. So he had roughly 7,000 mats sitting in a garage 4 hours away. And I heard about this, and so I called him. And I said to him, can I sell your mats on consignment? You'll get a piece of every mat I sell, but everything I sell above that threshold is mine. He hadn't touched them for about 2.5 years. So his response was, yes, please. So I came back and devised a plan. I would lead the sales initiative, and I would have my brother manage and handle all shipping. So that's just what we did. And it started to pick up where we made a website and we charged, I'll say, retail price. And then I started reaching out to different blogs and influencers and sending them a free one to review the mat. And then I'd go to daily deal sites and strike up wholesale arrangements to where it wasn't but a few months in that we had made our first 100 sales. And that's a marker when you're selling a product. Can you get to 100? And then we kept pushing and pushing, and before you knew it, it was 1,000, and then 2,000 and 3,000 and 4,000 that we were able to sell. with zero risk. So let's assess this side hustle really through those 3 M's: margin, market, and multiples. Was there margin for this opportunity? Yes. When we sold them at retail, there was a bigger margin than when we sold them at wholesale, but no matter which way we sold them, there was margin in the deal. Multiples. Yes, there were multiples. We were able to, at times, send 500 units to one daily deal site and have them take care of shipping and packaging to send them out across the country. And was there a market? Where there are kids and families, we found there to be a market for these type of playmats. So with that one side hustle, there was zero risk to myself. There was margin in the opportunity. There was a market for what we were bringing, and there was multiples. That's a good side hustle. Another example here recently, as the pandemic around COVID-19 began to take effect, many supply chains were broken down. And distilleries that were typically making vodka started making hand sanitizer because frontline clinicians were unable to procure hand sanitizer. Hospitals were unable to procure hand sanitizer. And there was a distillery about 5 hours away from where I live that started making hand sanitizer. And here in my local community, since I'm tied into the medical community, I saw that offices, hospitals, clinicians, nonprofits, their normal supply, their normal channel of procuring hand sanitizer was disrupted. And so there was a need in my local community. So what I did was call the distillery 5 hours away and ask if I could buy at wholesale some hand sanitizer from them in 5-gallon buckets, to which they said, sure. So once I knew I could buy from this distillery, I made and spent about 2 afternoons calling hospitals, clinics, doctors' offices, nonprofit organizations, heck, even the airport, to see if there was a need for hand sanitizer. The answer, yes. In just a few afternoons, I was able to pre-sell 200 gallons worth of hand sanitizer. And since it was pre-sold, there was no risk on my part, because then I took my pre-sales, went to the distillery, and said, I would like to purchase 200 gallons of hand sanitizer. And with that, my wife and I were able to make quickly, over a weekend, $3,500. That's a side hustle. Now let's analyze it through the 3 principles. Was there margin in this? Yes. In fact, since I knew my cost buying at wholesale, anything I put over that was my margin. Was there market for this? It was a short window, but absolutely. Supply chains had been broken and people were unable to procure hand sanitizer. And was there multiples? That's why I took the time to pre-sell it, to make sure that there was enough to be sold that it was a doable deal for myself and my wife. Again, I'll be talking more about side hustles and how to analyze them in the link below. So please click that and continue to follow along to learn more about side hustles, how I view them, and really how to start finding these opportunities out in the marketplace. And tip number 3, house hacking. A few years back, I was introduced to an individual by the name of Coach Carson. I read his guide, and it was called the House Hacking Guide, how to hack your housing, live for free, and start investing in real estate. And it caused some long nights where I couldn't sleep because this idea was just turning in my head. If this was truly possible, if I could indeed hack housing and live for free or near free. I'll link to Coach Carson below because he's got some good stuff. As I kept learning about house hacking, I said to myself, this is doable. This is absolutely doable. So what I did was the following. Prior to starting graduate school, I had a window of time where I was working, and I decided to buy a house. And so I bought a house that was 4 beds and 2 baths. And this is why I was still single. And what I did is then as I transitioned into graduate school, I rented out each of those rooms. So the 3 years I was in graduate school, I paid 0, and let me say that again, $0 for housing. If you calculate how much you spend on housing on a monthly basis, and let's just use a round number, $1,000 a month, $12,000 a year, $24,000 after 2 years, $36,000 after 3 years, just for hacking this house. that I saved that didn't go into my student loan debt. And so after I graduated school, I sold the house. And since I was living there longer than 2 years, all of the gains that I made were tax-free. So not only did I live for free, the gains I made were tax-free, and I could use those gains to immediately dump into my student loan debt to get that ball rolling. I also house hacked when I went and got my first job after school. It was the same principle, structured a little bit differently. Instead of buying a house, I went and rented a house. Again, 4 bedrooms, 2 baths. I lived in the master and rented out the 3 other rooms. I guess technically I subleased them. And in so doing, when the house was full, which it always was, I only paid $150 a month for rent. I basically, for 3 additional years, lived for free. Now, if you could say, what could you do if you lived 6 years with no housing costs? The answer, a lot. That, in essence, will pick up your snowball and just amplify it to a pace that you never knew. I found this was easier to do as a single person than as a married couple, because it really does require some hacking of the house, where you're renting out or you're subleasing or you're using the other rooms in a particular fashion. But this was key strategy to me during those years to help get us on our way to being debt-free. And down below, I'll really go into detail of each of the houses that I've hacked and how it really panned out from a month-to-month financial standpoint, and we'll really say from a year-to-year standpoint. So there you have it. That's my 3 tips. 1, you've got to have a budget. 2, side hustles that actually make money. And 3, house hacking. If you found this information helpful, subscribe. Come learn about things that we've done to become debt-free and follow us as we work towards financial longevity.